There's a switch on this too that you have to turn on, but we won't turn it on yet. So yeah. Oh no, you're right. Those two.
Sometimes Joanna was doing a reading and I was not it was not quite balanced enough, it was not quite tight enough, and then my stand just kept being down there, and I had to help her in the middle.
Oh my goodness. It happens.
I'm telling you, 20 hours. Yeah. That was the third time I was that too. It's not like I didn't know that. I know it was kind of messy. Is this a different standard or am I agreeing?
It is different. I'm a little bit worried about this clip. It's like broken.
Yeah.
Is there? Yeah, it's like this.
But it's the actual part that's on the stand that's broken.
Yeah.
Eventually, maybe we can see it. I think it's really home.
So I think for now it'll be okay. As long as we don't mess with it too much. See it sliding down. See that?
Yeah.
I think we should go with this. So hopefully it stays. This works all semester. I don't know why it's like broken. Yeah, it's a good height. Should be good. Okay, who's back there I can talk to? Abby. No. Why is it so quiet? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like it was even.
How about this now? No? Well, there are a lot of people talking. I know, but you'd be surprised. Is this better? Well, there's a little bit of echo, so yeah. It'll sound better once it's a little bit. I don't know why. I haven't done anything different. Yeah. Try this now. Hello? Is it anything? Sounds okay? You sure? Or more accurate? You think it sounds okay? Okay. I think it'll sound okay once people are quiet.
So I think we'll be okay when people are talking. I can say, but I don't think the evidence is happening.
Okay.
So I think
I think so. I think it'll sound okay once people are done talking. All right, we'll go with it.
All right, hello. Welcome all. Thank you for coming out tonight. Is this like the first official snow day that we've seen? Awesome. Welcome to the snow show. First tonight, we have a brief announcement, and then we will go ahead with our first introduction. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Catherine Fisher, and I'm an undergraduate student in creative writing in English, or creative writing and international business at Bowling Green State University. As part of my honors project, I'm conducting research on English and creative writing students' perception of career preparation. The study aims to assess student interest in career preparation and how it can be best delivered. This research will study the strengths and weaknesses of the English/creative writing program's career preparation. Your attendance at Prout/English 09 tonight means you may be an undergraduate enrolled in creative writing or English at Bowling Green State University. If so, you're being asked to participate in the research. Participation is completely voluntary. The decision whether to participate will not affect your relationship with Bowling Green State University, the Department of English, or the researchers involved in the study, including Abigail Cloud and myself. If you would like to participate in the study, you may scan a QR code found in the back of Prout Chapel. The QR code will direct you to a Qualtrics survey, which should take about 10 minutes to complete. Also, if you want to participate in the study, you may participate in a focus group. Participation in the focus group is expected to take about 45 to 60 minutes to complete. It will take place at 4:30 on Friday, November 22nd, and in the first floor large group room in Jerome Library. If there are any questions regarding the research, please contact myself, Catherine Fisher, or Abigail Cloud for more information. Our contact information can be found in the back of Prout Chapel next to the QR code for the survey. You may also contact the IRB Review Board, whose information is also available at the back of Chapel. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Good evening. It's my great honor that I get to introduce our first reader tonight, Madeleine Schreiber. Bless you. Madeleine hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. With her family's long history in the city, you could say she bleeds black and gold, although I think that's risky maybe to say in Ohio. In addition to her creative writing major, she's also finishing a word and image minor, which is a perfect foundation for her goal to work as a narrative designer in the video game industry. In the year I've worked with Madeleine, I've had the privilege of seeing her great talent and ingenuity firsthand. I've seen her incredible range with genres and themes, with fearless fiction that experiments and pushes boundaries with never sacrificing heart. From surprising horror stories about the card game Uno, it's scarier than you think, especially that wild draw four. It's rough. To stories with QR codes linked to music with the power to transport readers and listeners to an Irish pub, to novels that allow audiences to choose their own path and the character's emotional arc. Madeleine's inventive use of form is always purposeful and transformative. Like her stories, Madeleine wears many hats. She, of course, enjoys writing and thinking about writing, but she can also often be found researching video game narratives, cross-stitching new patterns, tending to her many, many plants, and serving in her officer role in BGSU's Herpetology Association. I didn't even know we had it. If you know Madeleine, it's no surprise that her writing is inviting and vitalizing. It's always asking us to travel outside our own comfort zones, asking us to engage with each other. And now I ask you to help me welcome Madeleine Schreiber.
I would first like to thank Joe for that lovely introduction. My classmates will tell you I did fight to have him as my genre advisor and the introduction, so I'm happy that all worked out. I also want to really thank my parents, because without them I wouldn't be standing here today. Tonight, I'll be reading a condensed version of my narrative game concept, Street Rat. This is only part one of a much longer story, so take this reading as an introduction or a tutorial level, where the player learns the game mechanics as well as what the character will be experiencing. You, the audience, will be the players and have the chance to affect our main character's experiences. There will be multiple times I will ask you, I will give you a choice, and you will convey by raising your hand after I read the 2 or 3 options. The one with the most hands raised will be the path taken. We will only experience 1 out of 7 of the endings tonight, but I invite you all to try and discover the others once my final copy of the thesis is printed in the BFA lounge. Everyone ready? Raise your hands. Street Rat, Part 1, Oakview School for Boys. Aiden set his school book down on the quilted bed as he took in the familiar sight of the sleeping quarters he shared with his roommate. The walls were empty, void of decoration, and the dull wallpaper separated from the walls in uneven strips. The room contained 2 creaking metal beds and 1 dresser where a white wash basin rested. The space was dreary and cold, just like the rest of the estate. The saving grace of the room was a large window on the furthest wall. He rested his hands on the windowsill, his forehead pressed against the glass, longing to know what he had yet to experience outside the school's walls. His eyes took in the somber charcoal clouds, a mix of late autumn air and pollution from New Belmar, the capital city. The teachers called it the city of progress and innovation. The students called it hell incarnate. Oakview School for Boys wasn't so much a school as it was a storehouse for the troubled, unwanted, and abandoned of New Belmar or other neighboring towns. When a boy under their care reached 15 years of age, a band of mosscoats, the feared police of the city, would throw him in a trailer and drive him to the towering factories. There he would begin his new life as a cog in the city's wheel of production, working till his body broke. Aiden would be turning 15 in 5 days, and would be forced to leave all he had known behind. He let out a low sigh as his eyes drifted over the forest pine trees to the far-off billowing towers of smoke and steam. His thoughts were interrupted by a small squeak. A rat sat staring up at him on the inside ledge where he rested his elbows. "Don't worry, Locke." He ran 2 fingers down her spine, embracing the soft brown and white fur. Aiden had found the small creature a year ago, and the 2 became inseparable. "I just get lost in thought sometimes. Nothing to fret over." He eyed his watch. "Time for dinner, but not mealtime for you just yet." Aiden picked up his friend and walked over to a small milk crate hidden from view under the metal frame of his bed. "I'll be back soon. Remember to stay silent and out of sight, okay?" She snuggled into a repurposed sock in the far wooden corner before nodding her head ever so slightly at the young boy. He pushed the crate away and fixed his quilt, hiding it from view, then rushed to the room, out of his room, and down the hall. The mess hall was a large space, ceiling curving upward to make a stretched dome overhead, which was painted with historical figures and events, one of which was the famed Eric Arnold, inventor of steam power, which rescued his country from dark ages. He founded New Belmar and was a strong advocate for the school when it was built. The other names of the men and women escaped Aiden's mind. As always, the hall was brimming with life as 100-some boys enjoyed their second meal of the day. Aiden made his way toward the kitchen, where a line shuffled along to collect the offered meal: tough meat, mashed potatoes, soggy green beans, and milk. Aiden stood in silence, listening to a group behind him chat between themselves. "Did you hear about Professor Wilson?" one boy asked slyly, while 2 others looked at him with excitement. "Today, Ryland attached some kind of tampered clock under the teacher's chair. As soon as our test began, it started ringing and smoking. But when Professor Wilson tried to figure out what was going on, the hands of the clock shot through his chair. It must have hurt because he grabbed his butt and started jumping around like a kangaroo." The 3 13-year-olds erupted in laughter. Aiden rolled his eyes. It wasn't uncommon for the older boys to pull such pranks, but he knew Ryland would likely be placed on cool duty for the next week once the headmaster found out. The line continued forward till Aiden arrived at the counter and peered over the eyeglass level. "Aiden, good to see you, little dove," rang Cook's voice, and Aiden smiled. She was a thin and gangly woman. Stringy gray hair shot out from under her hat, and her grin was crooked with shifting teeth. Her accent was thick and foreign, but calming. Ready for dinner? She scooped the usual contents onto a metal tray with an off-settling plop. Aiden's lips quivered, but he did his best to hide the disgust from her gaze. "Ann dear, that little friend of yours," she whispered. Aiden took note of the small bread roll placed on the tray's corner, leftovers from breakfast, no doubt. "Thank you, cook. Locke will greatly appreciate that." She winked at Aiden and waved him down the line. He took his normal seat along the 5 long tables before the joy of Cook's kindness departed from his face. "Are you all right?" Michael set his tray down in the open space next to Aiden and took a seat, voice as energetic as always. Michael, his roommate, was a small boy. He was small when he arrived as a toddler, and small even now at 11 years old. His hair was a dusty auburn with eyes of dark chocolate, and peachy skin covered him head to toe with freckles. "You're hardly eating," he said, eyeing Aiden's still full tray. Aiden squinted down, skeptical of the mashed potatoes which had turned an off gray in the stale air. His stomach turned. 5 days. His voice was distant, ghostly. 5 days? What do you want to... Oh, right. Would you like to talk about it? Michael said between bites, crumbs falling out of his mouth and littering the table. Aiden shook his head and raised a fork which had speared the tough meat. He took a bite, offering a warm smile to the freckled boy. The roommates ate what they could, enjoying each other's company in silence. The wall lamp was already lit as both boys entered their room, the dancing flame leaving ghostly shadows on the walls. Michael jumped into his bed, still spinning stories from class as Aiden leaned down to fish out the old milk crate. "Is it Locke time?" Aiden picked up his furry companion. "It's time for her dinner." He took a seat on the bed and placed Locke on his right knee. He broke the bread into small pieces and slowly offered them to her as his eyes drifted out the window, becoming lost in thought once again. Michael faced him. "Still thinking about the city?" Aiden nodded, not wanting to break his gaze. "Do you remember Robert? He was really tall, blonde, wicked at math." "He was older than me and was sent to New Belmar 2 years ago," Aiden replied, eyes still locked on the window. "Well," Michael's voice softened. "After the Mosscoats took him, I heard Kyle, Robert's roommate, stuck into the records office. Turns out Robert wasn't even 15 yet, only 13. Aiden's eyes widened. This was a chance. This was hope, and Aiden could feel the warmth in his chest. "I need to find my file tonight. Nothing stops the Mosscoats from collecting a few days early, and I can't miss this chance. When the clock strikes 1, I'll sneak into the file room and see what I can find." "I can help." His friend jumped from the bed. "We could be a team like always." "Welcome to your first choice. You have 2 options. You can either invite Michael to come along with you, or you can tell Michael to stay in his room. If you would like Michael to stay in the bedroom, please raise your hand now. Okay? If you would like Michael to join in your search, raise your hand. All right, Michael is joining. "You know, I wouldn't mind the company," Aiden said, offering his friend a warm yet uncertain smile. 2 sets of eyes would be better than 1, but he couldn't know what would happen if they were caught. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "If it means there's a chance you'll stay my roommate longer, then yes," he beamed. "All right, let's get some rest for a few hours and I'll wake you when it's time." Aiden lay in the darkness, listening to Michael's steady breathing. Locke had also taken rest, curled up on the pillow next to his head. Unlike his friends, Aiden couldn't sleep, not with the weight of all the rules he was about to break. The shadows shifted on the ceiling as the moon swept across the sky. The watch on Aiden's wrist showed the time, 1 o'clock, and the shock of adrenaline made quick work of his cloudy head. He carefully rolled from bed to avoid the creaking metal and patted Michael awake. "It's time," he said. Michael stirred and yawned. "All right." He stretched and wiped sleep from his eyes as Aiden began to change. Both boys threw on their work clothes, careful to not make much noise. Aiden picked up Locke and placed her on his shoulder. "You're bringing Locke? You never know if we'll need someone small to help." Michael nodded understanding. "Ready?" Aiden asked, his hand already on the bedroom door. "Ready," said Michael. The 3 traversed the school, down one stairwell then another, as Aiden tried his best to remember where the records office was located. "It's the same corridor as a teacher's lounge, I think." he whispered to Locke and Michael. Yep, we're on the right track, the freckled boy quickly responded. By the way, make sure to step carefully. Why is that? Michael hissed. If we make a sound, we'll awaken Seymour. As if a cruel joke, a floorboard groaned under Aiden's foot and echoed down the long, darkened corridor. Both boys froze in place as a whirl of gears and cogs began to draw closer. Quick, in here! Michael pulled Aiden's shirt, causing him to spin. He instantly grabbed onto Locke and followed his friend into a small broom closet he had not noticed before. The gears and cogs grew slowly closer. Aiden stared at the space, just on the other side. He couldn't look away. Every boy in the school knew Seymour, but few had seen him. He was a night guard for Oakview, a rumored specter that roamed the halls. Michael scooted closer to Aiden and whispered in his ear. He was once a boy at this school as well, but whatever factory he was sent to in the capital when he turned 15 broke him. Aiden's eyes stayed glued under the door as in the silver moonlight peeking through the hall. The other workers tried to fix him, but there wasn't much of them left, and all they had was an old grandfather clock. He was so monstrous that no one in New Belmar could take a look at him, and the school had to take him back. He now roams the halls at night, and if he catches any boys out and about, he turns them into monsters too. Michael eyed Aiden's worry, then turned his attention to Locke. Oh, he also eats rats. Locke stiffened, and Aiden lightly punched Michael's arm, but a heavy, lumbering footstep sounded on the other side of the door, but only for a moment. The sound of gears and cogs whined once more, and the figure wandered further down the hall away from them. They waited till the sound was so distant even Locke's ears no longer twitched. I think we're in the clear. Aiden let out a breath and released his clenched shoulders. The boys exited the closet and headed away from where Seymour most likely now stalked. The West Wing was home to teachers' offices, conference rooms, and lounges. The moonlight filtered through a window, illuminating the adjacent door, and like a beacon, it seemed to beckon Aiden closer. It looked the same as every other classroom, office, and storage door he had already passed, dark oak with a rounded arch. But this one had a bronze-engraved plaque reading Records Office in inky black lettering. This is it, he whispered to his companions. Aiden reached for the door handle, the metal stealing heat from his palm. It was locked. Aiden groaned in frustration and swore. We need to find another way in, he whispered again, and his eyes wandered around looking for another solution. Would you like to send Locke under the door or ask Michael for help? If you would like to send Locke, please raise your hand. If you would like to ask Michael for help, please raise your hand. We're going with the rat. Go, Locke. See if you can get us inside, Aiden whispered to his furry companion before setting her on the wooden floor below. Locke looked up at the two boys, her nose twitching and appeared understanding. Then she was off. Her body flattened like a plate and slid under the door. Michael crossed his arms and scowled at Aiden. How is a rat going to help us? He asked. Just be patient. She's smarter than you know. Aiden kept his eyes on the door handle. He trained her to unlock doors out of boredom one night, thinking nothing would come of it. But he was glad he did. The handle moved ever so slightly, then click. Told you. Aiden elbowed Michael, who stood in awe, jaw practically dangling on the floor. Aiden beamed as he reached for the handle once again. This time, the door opened. The room was warmer than Aiden would have thought as he walked into the space. Michael followed him and shut the door behind them as Locke climbed onto a desk not far from the entrance. The room was illuminated by a metal gas lamp, which sat patiently on a desk not far from the entrance. Tower after tower covered the room, each with 6 shelves and boxes. How are we going to find your file? Michael asked quietly. Each box on the shelf was labeled, meaning there was at least some organization. Aiden eyed a note tacked to a wall next to one of the boxes and read aloud. C or P indicates current or past student. The first number is the birth month. Second number is the week of the birth month. Letters represent first names. Aiden took off running with Locke close behind. This way, Michael. Box after box, he quickly read the label till he found what he'd been looking for. The box was labeled C, 10.3, A-F. All Aiden could hear was the sound of his breathing and thumping heart as he pulled it from the location and placed it onto the floor. Michael stood behind his crouched body with a supportive hand on his shoulder. Aiden plucked his file from the collection and opened it. His eyes scanned the first document, and his birth was clear. October 15th, 1895, 14 and 361 days ago. The hope Aiden had been holding on to so tightly slipped through his fingers along with the file. Maybe we can change it. We can switch the year so you're younger, Michael offered, but Aiden shook his head. Any edits would be easy to spot. He didn't know what to do and dropped the file in defeat. Michael bent down and picked up the papers and held one much different than the others. He handed Aiden a velvety envelope. It had already been opened, but it seemed the original contents were still inside. Carefully, Aiden pulled out the letter folded within. Beautiful cursive swirled on the page and dated this message on September 27, 1908, 2 years ago. To whom it may concern, I trust this letter finds you in good health. I am writing to inquire about a certain boy. His name, as I understand it, is Aiden, and was born on the 19th of October. He has been in your charge since birth, yet it is now, as he approaches his 15th birthday, I find myself compelled to seek him. I ask you keep this matter in confidence and understand it is essential that I take him under my guardianship. Aiden is of my blood, and I am requesting his release into my care immediately. I am prepared to meet any financial requirements you may deem proper. Sincerely, S.M. A stamp of a golden dragonfly surrounded by laurel's wreath lay next to the signature in dark blue ink. Aiden couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His voice shook as he spoke to his friend. There's someone out there, someone that knows me and can help. His gaze drifted back to the paper. I need to find them. Michael snatched the letter from Aiden and drew it close to his face. You have a family? This is huge, Aiden. He waved the letter high till Aiden grabbed it back and gave him a warning look. Sorry, Michael offering a sheepish grin. But look at the color of the stamp by the name. Aiden looked back at the dragonfly in the color blue. It was the same shade as the Capitol's flag. I need to leave for New Belmar tonight, Aiden stated without any falter in his voice, and Michael nodded. Aiden packed up the box but kept his own file with him. He placed the letter in his pocket, and with Michael close on his heels, they ran back to the door. Aiden carefully lifted the handle and peered into the hallway before him, but everything was silent. The group walked out, and Michael closed the door behind them. They found themselves close to the main hall, and the sound of a clock striking 2 rang out in the empty space. Aiden stopped and listened to the haunting chime, which echoed off the ceiling and walls surrounding him. There was a strange rhythm behind it, a beat like a drum. But when the chime stopped, the drumming continued. Aiden listened closely. The pulsing beat wasn't a drum. It was footsteps, and the footsteps were getting closer. Aiden had to make a decision fast. He could split from the group and tell Michael to run. It might give them both a fighting chance. But if they stay together, he could protect Michael. All right, would you guys like to split from Michael, or would you like to stay with him? If you'd like to split, raise your hand. If you'd like to stay, raise your hand. Okay. We are staying with Michael. What do we do, Aiden? Michael's small voice shook. Aiden crouched down and placed his hand on his friend's shoulders. Michael, listen to me very carefully. We need to hide. He looked to the cracked open door of the kitchen, knowing there was plenty of space. Aiden grabbed his friend's hand and held tight. Don't let go, okay? And bolted into the kitchen entrance. He shut the door behind them, sliding the bolt into place. Before Aiden could release his breath, a wooden spoon flew at their heads from the shadows. Out of here, you sneak. I have no food for ya, the voice hollered. Cook? Peeking above the counter, Aiden could make out her wiry silhouette. Aye, who's there? Her thick accent from across the salt sea calmed his nerves, and he placed a reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder as a lantern warmed the space. It's me, Aiden. And I brought Michael. Her eyes went soft as she looked upon him. She then looked to the smaller boy, his face frozen in terror. She opened her arms and Aiden ran into her embrace. "What are you doing down here at this hour, little dove?" she cooed, petting his hair. Aiden spoke softly. "I need to leave this place tonight." "And why's that?" Aiden pulled back and told her about the rumor Michael spoke, told her about the records room and the letter, told her about the steps in the hall trying to catch him. Aiden watched her eyes scan the kitchen, then draw back to him. "I have an idea. Follow me." She waved and the both boys followed, though Michael stayed a bit further back. Aiden followed her into the back entrance of the kitchen, where food deliveries were made. "In here, love." She pointed to a wooden box labeled Scraps in black lettering. Aiden looked at her with skeptical eyes. "There's nothing inside the box, just some old rags. It will get you to the city, though." "This isn't big enough for both of us." Cook cocked her head. "Both of yous?" Aiden nodded. "Yeah, for me and Michael." Michael's voice rang out, the sound shaky and tired. "I can't go with you, Aiden. I need to stay here." Aiden walked to his friend. "But what if I need my help? Your help? What if you need my help? You're my brother, Michael." Michael looked down in shame. "I won't make it in the city. All my medicine's here." Aiden began moving back to the kitchen entrance. "Then we'll go steal some real quick." Cook placed her hand and stopped him. "There isn't enough time. It's now or never." Although annoyed, Aiden nodded and stepped into the box, using Cook's hand for support. "Cook, will you keep an eye on him?" His eyes grazed over to the warm smile which spread on his friend's face. "Of course, little dove. He will stay well fed and protected as long as he's under my care. I promise." She wrapped her arms around Michael and kissed the top of his head. "Thank you. Now, remember to stay quiet. This box will get you to the market district in New Belmar. Then look for a woman named Rachel. She's my niece. She'll help you find your way after that." Aiden waved one more goodbye to Michael, then laid down the box as Cook placed the lid, banishing all light. He listened to the hushed voice of Cook and Michael as she had directed him to the office where he could sleep the rest of the night. A few minutes passed and a man's voice rang out from outside the box. "Any more, Cadence?" Cook responded, knocking on the lid. "Just this, Harold. Be careful with it, would ya?" The man coughed. Yeah, I will." Aiden felt the box be lifted onto wheels, rolled down the ramp, then lifted onto the back of what he assumed to be a truck. The engine roared, and Aiden let out a breath of relief. He felt the rumbling truck rock him and lock into restful sleep as they headed toward New Belmar. Peace of Mind, Part 1, ending 7 of 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeleine. My name is Mike Schulz, and I have the pleasure of introducing our second reader tonight, Jacob Crespo. If you've seen the posters advertising tonight's reading or seen Jacob walking around, you may notice he's always wearing a stocking cap that says "dead" inside. In fact, I've never seen him not wearing that hat. It makes me wonder, what's really under that hat? Is there a nest cuddling little bird eggs? Maybe a baby squirrel curled up in a ball beneath its bushy tail? A roll of quarters for emergency laundry? A pile of potpourri? Sticky notes with sketches of mythological creatures? A kazoo? A matchbox cover? All of the pull tabs from the cans of peace tea he drinks every Tuesday and Thursday morning? The key to a treasure chest that he hides under his bed? A fortune cookie? A nail file? Another smaller hat? Or maybe it's a tiny skeleton, dead inside. Get it? That's my one dad joke, promise. All right, now these possibilities may all sound absurd, but part of me thinks that provoking these curiosities is exactly what Jacob wants. His persona, his voice, his writing, in pursuit of creating moments that put together unlikely matches, all to entertain. In fact, he says that he lives life chasing humor, so it's no surprise that his fiction does the same. Whether it's a retired exorcist and a skeleton from New Zealand contemplating the afterlife in Wyoming, or the sudden appearance of men dressed in medieval garb in a suburban mom's day, his writing creates situations that make us question our sense of humor and reflect back to us the absolute absurdity of the world we live in. All of these ideas come from Jacob's wonderful imagination. Born in West Virginia, nurtured in Napoleon, Ohio, and developed here among friends in the creative writing program. He says without these friends, his life would be grayscale when he knows it should be filled with color. His advice to future BFA students is to find friendships that you treasure more than anything else. He says life and writing are tough. There's no reason to go through it alone. Jacob's characters reflect this desire for friendship, for camaraderie. They're looking for answers to explain their lives, to somehow make sense of the world and circumstances they find themselves in. We're lucky in that we get to follow them as they emerge from Jacob's mind onto the page, and tonight, right here into Prout Chapel. Please help me welcome Jacob Crespo.
You ran out of budget for the entourage. Thank you, Mike, for the sublime 5 out of 10 intro. Always advise people to not turn in first drafts. We'll have to meet about that. All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for Madeleine being my reading partner tonight. I hope you all enjoyed her lovely story, and I hope you had fun with the choose your own adventure aspects. The story that I'll be reading tonight is Renaissance Without the Festival. I had the idea for this story while reading the Kagero Nikki, which is a story about a wife, one of many wives, who misses her husband and becomes forlorn as he ignores her. And he constantly comes up with excuses of why he can't see her. Now, that has nothing to do with this story. I'm joking. While I was reading it, I had the thought, what if those excuses were real? What if they came to life one day? What if the most absurd excuse someone could give became the reality? And so that's where this story begins. It is a condensed version and an unfinished version. I did my best to end it in a way that I hate because I hate myself. All right. Right. Without further ado, here's Renaissance Without the Festival. March 27th marked the day Rachel Hall went mad. The smell of fried bacon drifted through the house as she stood at the stove in her mossy green robe. She loved it since it accentuated the gold in her hazel eyes. It also paired well with the cool tone of her pale skin and chestnut hair. The color was one of those things she tried in high school on a friend's recommendation and decided to make her iconic look. The sizzling of this batch of bacon began to quiet down little by little, so she turned her attention to the coffee pot. A pot would have already been made by her husband Adam on a normal day, but not this morning. She started a pot once the bacon press was on a new round of meat, letting the aroma of the breakfast roast mix with the bacon. Her 2 sons, Avery and Jack, would soon come thumping down the stairs now that it was 7:45, and yawn as they took their seats at the large oak dining table. Rachel knew this day was going to have a different start than normal, but had not expected the tension to last this long. She and her husband had gotten into a nasty argument about him staying out late drinking with friends last night. It was a problem that arose a few times during the 9 years they'd been married, but it was becoming more frequent as of late. He stayed out late on 4 nights during this week alone and woke up hungover for each time. The first night, he gave the excuse that one of his coworkers begged him to go out with the others. On the next, he explained that one of his high school buddies was having a small birthday get-together. On the third, apparently one of the guys at work was leaving, so they had to have a proper send-off. Having enough of it, Rachel stayed up until he got home at 2 a.m. to confront him despite needing to be up at 5 to get ready for the day. Rachel tried to stress the importance of being a responsible father and taking care of himself, but the whole time he ignored her without saying a word after his excuse of work was hard today. Fed up with him and his boozy smell, she pushed him back out the door and locked him out. If he wanted to be that way, then he could sleep in his car. When she woke up that morning, she unlocked the door for him to come in before her shower, but he had to do so despite breakfast now being ready. Rachel sighed and plated the food, some bacon and toast, before setting it on the table for the kids to eat. As the coffee continued to fill the pot, she walked through the living room over to the front door and opened it to look out the driveway. She frowned as she saw his 2016 Prius still in the driveway, but no one was inside of it. Her 2007 Saturn was there beside it in the driveway, empty as well. The 31-year-old had expected him to come in and apologize to her this morning, not disappear. A note stuck to the door caught her attention. Rachel grabbed the note and read it. Lady Rachel, my honorable intent to continue our discussion now that you've tempered your anger has been torn asunder by fate. The king has called me away to battle, and I must answer the call. Please do not let your disappointment poison the hearts of our children. This is a trial that they too will have to brave one day. I will see you again upon my glorious return. Love, Sir Adam. What the fuck is this? Any semblance of worry and doubt she had moments ago burned away in anger and frustration. After everything she said last night about being responsible, he goes and pulls whatever this shit was. Rachel slammed the door shut behind her as she turned back to the living room. Her hands crumpled the piece of paper into a tight ball and squeezed it. What's wrong, Mama? Avery, her youngest, called out from the kitchen. Nothing, Avery. Just your father being a jackass. She moved to the kitchen where the pot of coffee was waiting for her. She was not caffeinated enough to put up with this yet. My jackass? Avery asked, almost making Jack spit out his bacon sandwich. Rachel's eyes turned and glared at him. Avery Levi Hall, you do not say those words, she warned. Avery looked at her with an incredulous face and began to argue. But you just said it. Why is it bad when I say it? Because I said so. Now, no lip or you won't be allowed to play your game tonight, she warned. Avery swallowed his frustration, knowing he couldn't win against his mother. That's what I thought. She poured herself a cup of coffee and drank it with a dash of milk to cool it down. The morning was off to a much more chaotic start than she anticipated, and a migraine was already starting to develop in her temples. Rachel's mind chose to retreat into the flavor of her coffee for a moment of respite. All right, boys, go to your room and get dressed for school. I'll drive you today since your father's off doing God knows what. Jack grabbed his glass of orange juice and chugged it before running off with Avery. Not long after, Rachel went to her own bedroom to change out of her robe. She threw on one of her casual outfits, an olive green shirt and khaki pants. She didn't plan to go out into town today, so she kept on her gray slippers rather than putting on socks and sneakers. The whole incident with her husband kept weighing on her mind. Did he think she would laugh at this little disappearance act in the note? What was the note even supposed to mean? The king called him the battle. They lived in Connecticut, for Christ's sake. Rachel rubbed the corner of her eyes as she clenched them shut, trying to deal with the headache. Her purse had a bottle of ibuprofen in it, so she would take some in the car. Out in the living room, her 2 boys were ready, waiting for her. Both went to elementary school, but Jack was 9 while Avery was just 7. With a snap of her fingers, Rachel motioned the boys out of the front door ahead of her. She grabbed the car keys from the door hook and made her way out into the cool morning air. Whoa! Her 2 boys exclaimed in unison. She saw them run over to their neighbor Pat's driveway. Her gaze followed them to see what could make them so excited. Instead of Pat's usual Charger being in his driveway, Pat stood next to a gray and white stallion. It was a tall horse, its head 2 feet above Pat's own. He wasn't dressed in his usual polo shirt and blue jeans either. The 51-year-old man wore a red doublet and a pair of ill-fitting gray leggings. It was all in stark contrast to Pat's cookie-cutter white suburban house, the same design as everyone in this neighborhood. He stood there, brushing down the horse as he muttered to himself. Pat, can we pet it, please? Jack begged. He bounced on his toes with excitement, while Avery took it upon himself to pet the beast anyway. A gentle snort escaped its nose while Pat smiled at the two. Come on, kids, get in the car, we'll be late, she said. When they did not budge, she called them by their middle names. That was enough to startle them back and run over to the car, but not before Jack doubled back and petted the horse as well. Good morrow, Lady Hall. It certainly is a fine day out, Pat called over to her. Once the two boys were in the car, Rachel looked over at the man. He seemed confused why her gaze was so bewildered. She walked over to him in her little gray slippers and folded her arms in front of her. She had to marvel at the horse, even if it was all a little strange. Certainly is a beautiful horse, Pat. Indeed, he is a fine beauty. I haven't encountered a more reliable steed. What happened to your car? You love your Charger more than your own children. I beg your pardon. Charger's right here, he said, patting the side of the large stallion with a proud smile. Right. Have you seen my husband this morning? Why, yes, I have. Sir Adam was called away by the king this morning to ride with him into battle. What do you mean the king called him away to battle? What are you talking about? Her arms unfolded as her brow furrowed. It is as I said, my lady. The Viscount of Torn, Philip Russell, has led a coup against the crown. Sir Adam was conscripted as a knight to fight in the royal army, Pat explained, as if this were all common knowledge. Do take care to keep watch over the boys today, Lady Hall. We live in times of uncertainty, and I am positive Sir Hall will take care of things and be back swiftly. Adam's a plumber. I don't have time for this right now. I have to take the kids to school. If you see my husband, tell him to call me. He has a lot of explaining to do right now. She turned on her heels before walking off to her car. I don't understand what's angered you so, Lady Hall, Pat called after her. But she refused to hear any more of this nonsense for fear of the kids being late. She moved her gear shift into reverse before pulling out of the driveway and down the road. When she got to the stop sign at the end of the street, she took 2 ibuprofen and did her best to relax with a few deep breaths. Everything just left her with more questions. Their home was situated near the entrance to Torrance Margrave suburb, so it didn't take long before they reached downtown. The school was about 10 minutes away from their house, 18 if Rachel got unlucky with traffic lights. If only traffic lights were the biggest issue she'd face on this drive. The moment she reached downtown Torrance, traffic slowed to a grueling pace. What was the cause of all this traffic? Horses. It seemed to Rachel that 1 out of every 8 vehicles on the road was some guy on a horse dressed as ridiculously as Pat, though none of the horses could compare to his. Some wore tunics that were worn and covered in patchwork repair, while others wore tailored doublets that she would expect to see at a run fair. Both looked dumb to Rachel. The people on horses just sauntered along, controlling the pace of traffic, while everyone else in cars just seemed to accept that this is how things are going to work today. Plenty of people on the sidewalk who passed by Rachel's Saturn were dressed like those on horses. Not enough for there to be a large crowd of them, but there were at least 8 people in Renaissance garb scattered on each side of the street at any one time. Men seemed to be the main culprits, but every once in a while Rachel would see a woman in mended gowns walk by as well. It turned what should have been a 15-minute drive into a 30-minute one. Rachel would bang her head against the top of the steering wheel every time the red light extended this brutal journey, drawing worried stares from the children in the back. When they reached the school at last, Rachel was relieved to see other parents still dropping off their kids as well. If the kids arrived late on a normal day, the front doors would be locked and parents would have to take their kids to the office. However, a man in red and yellow jester's outfit stood at the front of the doors, holding them open. Upon a closer look, Rachel could recognize him as the principal, Mr. Wilde. He saw her looking at him when she pulled up to the doors and gave an enthusiastic wave. A large smile spread across his cheeks as the faint sound of ringing bells from his hat and sleeves reached Rachel's ears. So this is the moment of our first skip. It's a relatively short one in the course of the story. All that happens is that Rachel talks with the principal to see if there's an event going on. Of course, he has no clue. And she Googles to see if there was a Ren Fair happening, but there's no news about one. After that, she drops the kids off and makes her way back downtown. The middle of downtown is even more of a mess on her way back through than the first time. People now walked in the middle of the street, both the Renaissance and normal alike. By now, 80% of the people around her were dressed up. The crowd was so dense that she could not make out any other cars left on the road. To maneuver her car through all of it felt like she was driving through a river of honey. The buildings around her showed signs of DIY repurposing as well. The mechanic's shop had all of its garage doors open as men in leather aprons hammered out hot metal using crude forges. The Big Y grocery store looked like it had been stripped out and turned into a vendor market. The shelving was used to build little impromptu stalls for people to hawk goods out of. One man she saw was yelling at the top of his lungs for someone to please buy his carrots. But they were clearly the baby carrots in a bag from the produce aisle. Most of the people selling goods wore the same doublets as Pat, but in varying bright colors. When she reached another standstill at an intersection, Rachel pulled her phone out to call one of her friends to see if she was also going through all this pain. Before she could dial her number, there came a sudden, sharp knocking against the side of the window that made Rachel jump and fumble her phone. It fell through her fingers and bounced off the seat onto the floor of the car. An officer, wearing a large pair of sunglasses with a lampshade mustache, looked in at her, waiting for her to roll the window down. She hesitated for a moment before holding down the button to do so, a forced smile on her lips. "Hello, are you supposed to be on your phone while driving, ma'am?" "Well, no, but traffic has been still for 3 minutes, and you decided to drive distracted with all these pedestrians." Rachel felt her eye twitching, but she just swallowed and nodded. "I understand, officer. I'll try my—" "What's going on here?" a new voice interrupted. Rachel glanced over and saw another officer sporting a matching lampshade mustache and sunglasses, but this one wore full plate armor with an ornate crest of a lion roaring over his left breast. "Oh my God!" Her forehead fell to the steering wheel with a smack, adding to the red mark above her brow that was forming from the repeated thumps today. The armor-wearing officer smacked the arm of his partner and motioned him to step back. "Ah, it's Lady Hall, wife of Sir Adam Hall," he exclaimed. "Our apologies. I could not recognize you in a horseless metal carriage such as this." Rachel's hands gripped the wheel until her knuckles turned white. She peeked up at the men from the corner of her eye as the brain registered that sentence. She was unsure what she should be feeling at this point. "If I may ask, how do you know my husband?" "Why, everyone knows Sir Adam Hall," he exclaimed with a hearty chuckle. "His contributions to the Battle of TJ Maxx were legendary." TJ Maxx, huh? Is he still around that area? She raised her brow. "Ah, that happened a little while ago. Last I heard, the cavalry split off from the infantry of the king. They're heading over to Paul's Auto Repair to have their weapons and armor examined to rest their horses." Rachel nodded her head a little and gave a final wave to the officers, rolling her windows up before they could say another word. She wasn't going to let a chance to get answers slip away from her. Rachel maneuvered her car into a parking space along the side of the road. She continued on foot after grabbing her phone from the floor of the car. It had taken 5 minutes just to get to a parking space right in front of her. If she tried to drive to Paul's Auto Repair from here, she would miss her husband for sure. And this is where we reach our second skip in the story. Basically what happens is Rachel runs all over town on a goose chase, encountering people who have claimed to see her husband someplace else. After hours of running around, her frustration builds until her search leads to Adam's boss. He informs her that her husband was laid off 2 weeks ago. Her search brings her back home. Rachel pulled her Saturn to the driveway. The suburbs had also become much busier since she left a little over 6 hours earlier. Across the street, one of her neighbors, Miss Julian, looked as if she were having a party. A similar sight could be seen a little further up the road, and another after that. Horses lined the sidewalk as men funneled in and out of the house. With their rosy cheeks and slight stumbles, it was safe to say that they were thoroughly drunk. Rachel walked over and peeked inside. Julian's home had indeed been converted into a little bar. Miss Julian herself stood at the opening to the kitchen with a wide smile on her face as her daughter carried tankards in and out of the doorway to all the thirsty people. The warmth coming from inside tugged at Rachel's mind, drawing her in from the crisp air outside. She drifted in and found a place to sit at a fold-out table, situated with a banged-up metal tankard of room-temperature ale, in exchange for one of the copper coins she got from the auto repair. She looked down into the golden brown color of the ale and let her mind try to make sense of all this. Her headache only grew worse as everything piled onto her thoughts one after another. Despite the whole city turning into some big party she wasn't invited to, the thing that weighed on her most was Adam being unemployed. She didn't know why he didn't tell her. Was he embarrassed? Bitter? Where was he even going all day? The more she thought about it, the less answers she had. Behind her, the chanting of the crowd over a drinking contest broke her from her thoughts. She turned in time to see various men in the crowd slapping the top of a bald man's head who had apparently lost the contest. They called him every insult under the sun between fits of laughter. Thank goodness Avery wasn't here, or the word jackass would have been the last of her worries. Avery and Jack. Rachel checked the time on her phone. School would be letting out soon. She dreaded the idea of getting back in her car once again, but she couldn't just leave them there. She stood up from the table without bothering to touch her drink and walked back out to brave her own little world of madness once more. That's the end.
Thank you all very much. QR code in the back. Have a wonderful evening.